Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, and this week I am tackling a M2 Wiend van. Straight out of the package, nothing fancy. As always, if you like what you see, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified of all future videos. So yeah, this is a brand new M2. This is part of a 4-car set that a buddy of mine, Paul, gave me from when he worked at O'Reilly's Auto Parts. And this was supposed to be something kind of quick and simple, and overall it was. It started off as a wheel swap, pretty basic, nothing fancy. All M2s are held together with screws, and then the individual parts are glued on, usually from like the back, like there's a tab that sticks through and glued on. So taking it apart is obviously step one. And the one thing that kind of bugged me about this casting, aside from the logos and all the decals on it, was mainly the wheels. It just, and I know they're kind of stock and all that stuff, but it just, for me, wasn't anything that I had any interest in keeping. So after it's taken apart, obviously I'm looking and I'm trying to find all the little tabs and everything else. And this is a weird setup. The front windshield and then the rest of the windshield are separate pieces. And then the front windshield won't come out until you take the dashboard out. So there's a specific order here on how you have to kind of take this one apart. You can see I just popped the dash out. And then after I've drilled out the posts for the windshield, and you got to do that very carefully, you can actually pry out the front windshield. Then you can take the rest of the windshield out, which is almost like a big U, and it covers all the side window, the two side windows and the back windows. So overall, it's not too difficult, but you got to be careful, because if you don't drill right, you'll either drill through or you'll crack the glass. And once all that's out, then I can actually get to all the little posts that are glued through the back and just kind of scrape it off, and then you kind of just almost poke everything off. You got to be careful. Obviously, it's tabs, so if you pry too far on one side, like on the bumpers, you could crack them. So you just have to be careful. It's not super difficult, but it's something you got to kind of pay attention to. So the grill also comes off. The headlights come out. Everything comes off this, and ideally, what my main goal with this was to do the wheels, and then I wanted to kind of practice. I get some other builds coming up, so I need a lot of times I'll do stuff just because I haven't done it in a while, or I'm not sure how to do it, and I'll just pick a car, or in this case a van, to test with. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this. So I have these Rail Riders. They're pretty slick. The fronts are a little thinner, and then the backs are pretty thick. I ended up swapping out the back tires off of another set of tires that are just maybe a 1/16 smaller in width, because at this scale every little bit helps, and I was having a really hard time trying to get these back wheels tucked into this thing. So at first I just figured let me cut out where the axles go, because the original casting just has holes and the axles slip through the holes. I can't do that because I have to narrow everything. So you can kind of see how I'm starting to mock things up a little bit. And those are actually the tires I replaced. I got some, they're just, like I said, a 1/16 thinner on both sides. Fronts are going to stay exactly the way they are, except with an axle tube. So in order to get these rear tires and front tires to fit, front tires I just had to kind of groove away a little bit, just for clearance issues, because I haven't tucked up so high. The back is where 95% of, and this took forever to do, because I'm always overcautious when it comes to grinding and cutting. As much as I enjoy doing it, I don't want to overdo it, and it's very easy to do. You get carried away. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do is try to clear away the sides so that I can get the wheel to actually sit in there with the full diameter of the wheel. And then I slowly start grinding away on the insides to narrow the rear end. And it's every casting's slightly different, and I always seem to pick wheels that are a lot bigger or shit that shouldn't go where I'm putting it. So I always end up having to grind away a lot more than I should. But it's all about the stance for me, so it's worth the effort. I'm going to use my axle tubes. Now these are M2 axles, so you have to go. I believe I can't read that. My eyesight's horrible. I believe they're 3/32 tube, brass tube from K&S. 1/16 is what I normally use for Hot Wheels, but the M2 axles are slightly larger in diameter, so that's why I'm kind of going a little bit bigger. And I could be, actually, you know what? I'm wrong. These are the 1/16 because I'm using Hot Wheels wheels. Disregard everything I just said. I'm sorry, I'm tired and doing this probably when I shouldn't be doing my voiceovers here. Hope everybody had a good holiday. So the axles, you've seen me do it before. If you've watched any of my videos, I have a piece of piano wire that I use to cut the grooves in each axle that allows me to glue the axles in. Instead of trying to stick it in the end, I'll put it in the middle and keeps the tires from really sticking and gluing themselves to the axle tube. But if you stick the piano wire in, it allows you to grind down and not go too far. You know exactly how far you've gone, and it helps pull out the little pieces that get stuck inside, so it serves a dual purpose. And because the wheels were the axles that came on the front wheels were slightly long to fit where I needed it to be. Once I've cut it in half, I'm just going to trim a little bit on each side, and then I'm going to fit it just to make sure that when I push one axle in, I'm not pushing the other one out. So aside from the wheels, I figured let me screw around with some weathering. So I got my Scotch-Brite pad, and I'm just, at this point, this is great because I don't care what happens. And sometimes that's when you have some decent results, is if you don't care, because I had every intention of just stripping this thing and painting it anyways. Worst case scenario, it wasn't a big deal. So I'm taking a lot of the shine off the black, and I'm trying to get all the decals or tampos or screen printed stuff off the side of the actual casting itself. So the Scotch-Brite pad works out really, really well. And again, I'm doing everything in order of how I actually do shit. So sometimes it's not always going to flow the way a video probably should. While I was doing that, I realized that my interior, I need to trim as well. So that's kind of what I was doing. So for something different, I mixed up some milliput. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to sit inside the actual, where the axles are going to sit. And you can see right there, I'm using a piece of styrene underneath to kind of set the ride height. So now I'm able to make a dent with the axle tubes in the milliput to the height, the ride height that I want, which I already predetermined and realized that it was a piece of styrene is about the height I wanted off the ground. So this works out perfectly. And then once the milliput hardens up, you just can kind of glue your axles in. You already got a pre-made channel for them to sit in, and it works out really, really well. And you can see right here how, I don't know, I'm not very good at doing that, but there you go. You can just see how everything rolls. Height's perfect. So now I figure, all right, I'm going to break out my weathering powders, which I don't use very, very often. And I'm using 3 different shades of rust. And I'm just going to take my little makeup brush thing that comes with it, and I'm just going to hit all the bare metal spots from when I sanded it. And this is just trial and error. I can't tell you how to do it. You just have to kind of play around with it. I'm going with different shades over each other just because it works. Rust isn't all one color. It's multiple colors because rust has multiple stages. And that's just pretty much what I'm doing. And I've owned a mid-engine van. It was a Ford, but I've owned a mid-engine van, and I kind of went by where the rust was on that and where they're prone to rust. So it was somewhat realistic. And you can kind of see any place that there's almost like a flatter surface that rain would drip down. That's kind of what I'm doing on the sides, making like rust streaks, I guess you could say. And it's hard to do it to scale. So, I mean, you just have to go what looks good. And, you know, worst case, you just wipe it off or sand it off and start over again. That's kind of what I'm doing, is just playing around, seeing what looks good. I'll add one shade, and then I'll go back and I'll add another shade slightly over it, but not completely, so that each spot has varying shades of rust. The roof is obviously a huge spot that would get a lot of rust, mainly because it's flat and rain sits on it. And if you live in New England, you get pretty familiar with rust because that's pretty much all we have to work with, unless we get cars from down south, which doesn't happen very often anymore. So, and I'm hitting some bigger, you can see hitting some spots, like definite spots. I'm not just streaking the whole thing like I am right there on the sides. And I use my finger. You'll see that I kind of smudge things over. You can get a smudge stick too. They come with a lot of art kits, or you can buy them individually. Those work well. Mine fell off the table. I don't know where the hell it went. So, but again, I'm still refitting and fitting. That's after all the bumpers and everything, glass was put back together. And then I'm going to take some Xandri dust, which is a Citadel paint color, and I'm going to dry brush a lot of dirt and sand on the windshield, on the glass, anything like that. I just want this thing to look like it was pulled out of a junkyard. It got running. Somebody did all the bright work, slammed it, and is just driving it with the patina on it. Then to finish it off, I'm grabbing my Citadel Typhus Corrosion, and that's just going to give me another texture. So you got color, and then you got texture, and the Typhus Corrosion is a textured paint. It's got a little bit of grit to it, and that stuff, if you watch any of my other videos, I've used it a lot, especially on the Gasland stuff. It works awesome. It dries really quick, and it dries with a texture, and it's like a mud brown. They do have one that's strictly mud. It's called Sterling Mud or Sterling Mud or some shit like that, but it works awesome. This stuff is designed where you can use this Ryza Rust and dry brush that on. And that orange, even though it looks really bright, when it goes on, the Typhus Corrosion, it goes on and it's got that fresh rust look, and it's really cool. So that's kind of what I was doing, what I was going for here. So I've got multiple. I got paint fade. I've got the weathering powders, and I've got this more recent rust stuff as far as textures go. So I think I nailed it. I like it. Definitely not, could definitely be better, but this whole thing was about practicing, and considering I was screwing around, I think it came out pretty good. Shout out to all my Patreon members who help feed my addiction and help bring videos to the masses. I appreciate it. The ones with the icons next to them are linked down below in the description. Please check them out. So this is what I started with. If a little recap, nothing fancy. Looks like something out of an old 70s movie. Just plain and simple. Skinny wheels, very generic. And it's got the goofy tampos on it. So this is what I ended up with. I love the slam look. Thing rolls like a dream, and I'm kind of happy with the rust. I mean, it needs improvement, but overall, I like it. And I hope you guys do too. And appreciate you guys watching, commenting, all you guys who subscribed. Thank you very much. Again, hope you guys are having a good holiday, and I'll catch you on the next one.